Hello fans of the NPL and welcome back for another week of the NPL Minors Season 4 Power Rankings, this time for Week 9. You may notice that my voice sounds different from the person's voice you heard in the last video. That is because I am your host Richard, and I am back, and my wonderful co-host Noah, aka no pun intended. Thank you so much, man, for covering for last week. It was probably a big undertaking, so say hi to the people, say what's going on.
I'm so glad, Richard, that you are back. Let's just get that out of the way immediately. But hello, everyone. It's good to be back for Week 9 of the Power Rankings, and we only have 1 week left after this, so we're coming down to the home stretch.
Yeah, we're definitely going to try to pull out all the stops and try to push out these videos as quickly as we can. I know some of the coaches' games were delayed this week. That's why this video was a little bit delayed. Plus, you know, real life just gets busy. Anyone who does anything recreational or even anything relating to any sort of business, you know that life often gets in the way of things. So hopefully that's understandable to you guys. Before we get into the rankings this week, I do have some general notes as always. So, 2 games were unable to be watched from any perspective as of recording these rankings, at least as far as I know. There were no Showdown replays or YouTube uploads that we could access, which means that we have 4 teams that are kind of difficult to rank accurately. Those teams are the Tennessee Dynamos, the Maine Red Cloudsters, the Oklahoma City Thunderous, and the Vancouver Stealth Rocks. Now, their games may be available by the time we upload this, maybe not, so I don't know, but as of right now, they do not. Now, we did try to rank them based on the scores of the games and on the current league standings, but unfortunately we can't give much of a deeper analysis. This week we will see 6 more teams falling out of playoff contention, which are the Vancouver Stealth Rocks, the Colorado Avalugs, the Phoenix Midnights, the Maine Red Cloudsters, the Los Angeles Clefable, and the Bullet Punch Club. The first 4 teams are all actually from the Dusk Conference, meaning that the other 4 teams in that conference are all confirmed for playoffs, but we'll talk about that more at the end. We will still continue to talk about the teams who have fallen out of playoff contention at least a little bit, because I don't believe in not talking about a team, as their contribution is still contribution and deserves to be recognized. But without further ado, let us get into our ranks. At number 16, I have the Rotterdam Star Raptors. Noah has the Vancouver Stealth Rocks. We actually have the same 4 teams, just in different positions at the bottom 4, so I think we can agree on which teams are at the bottom, just not quite where they're at exactly. But for the Rotterdam Star Raptors, it seems like Blastoise was intended to be a switch into Suicune, but when your Blastoise takes 38.3% damage from said Suicune Scald, that's potentially a 3-hit KO and barely counts as a check at that point. Blastoise ends up doing practically nothing in this game, going down to 2 Power Gems from Adam's Nihilego, which it also tried and failed to switch into. Electrode actually got a kill though, so that's something. I did really like the Swords Dance Gliscor set, and the fact that it was able to take on a Dragon Dance Mega Altaria. That was a pretty effective point of prep and saved him from possibly getting swept. Ultimately, I think Freeze just ran out of responses to Adam's team too quickly this week and struggled to get the offensive momentum in his favor. Noah.
So I'm probably just going to go to the Rotterdam Raptors right now, since my number 16 team did not upload their side, did not provide a replay, nothing actually happened. So talking about those Rotterdam Raptors, which are my number 15 team, Freeze continues to find himself walled out on a week-to-week basis. Even as Mega Gardevoir, the supposed wall breaker that he drafted in the first round, gets played around a bit too much for my taste. This week he got Iron-Headed twice by Mew, and it responded by dealing under half damage to it with its Hyper Voice. I'm sure Freeze would like to forget about his performance this season, and frankly, so would I. But Richard, you can talk about the Vancouver Stealth Rocks if you have anything to say about them.
Right, so this is one of the games for which we only have a score. Carney lost 3-0 to the Oklahoma City Thunderous. He's had a fairly rough season overall. I don't think it's any surprise to see him in our bottom couple of ranks once more, but I do hope that he can pull together a better performance next season. But moving on now to our number 14s, I have the Los Angeles Clefable. Noah, you have the Colorado Avalugs. Greg brought some spicy memes to this match, knowing that his chances at playoffs were very slim. My favorite set would have to be that Porygon 2, though, which traced the Azumarill's huge power, and potentially could have swept if Ace's team had been any more worn down. I didn't imagine that I'd ever be saying that, but I think that that Porygon 2 set might actually be somewhat effective in different circumstances. Noah.
So number 14, I put the Colorado Avalugs. Now, if we were to flash back to a previous Power Rankings video, I would have said that Dhelmise takes 80% damage from the first attack it attempts to withstand every single week. For this game, the famous Ghost Anchor took 81% from Frostlass's Ice Beam, proving that I'm completely on fire with my analysis. Speaking of fire, it was most unfortunate that Keegan's Charizard X got frozen. I guess it didn't have Flare Blitz this week, and would have been very convenient if he did, but Keegan's fate was sealed when Juice Melodic set up a safeguard against Chansey, and then he swapped into Mega Pitar, and Keegan had nothing left that could tank an attack or outspeed it at +1/+1, which validated pretty much everyone else's opinion that Chansey is set up fodder. But moving on, my number 13 team is the Los Angeles Clefable. Richard has the Colorado Avalugs. It's difficult to blame Greg so much for his performance this season, except for joining too many upload leagues at one time. I know he's better than this game would indicate, and while I do like the fact that he's trying unconventional sets and memeing, like tracing Azumarill's huge power with Porygon 2, if you end up losing with your sets, you're not going to move up in these rankings despite your creativity. It also just generally seemed like he underprepped for Tangrowth a lot. Richard.
So, for the Colorado Avalogs, after 2 exchanges of hazards from both teams to start the game, Keegan sends in his Charizard, which gets frozen by the Frostless's Ice Beam and ends up being unable to thaw out, rendering it unable to do anything in the match, which was very unfortunate. It looked like he was trying to force out the Frostless with his Aerodactyl so that he could double into his Dhelmise to spin away the hazards, but Frostless ended up staying in, likely a Focus Sash lead variant, and got a huge chunk of damage off on the incoming Dhelmise with an Ice Beam, then finished it off the following turn. Keegan then sends in his Aerodactyl once more, as Yost this time switches out into Donphan. It's okay though, Keegan misses the Stone Edge anyway, and Donphan is able to remove the hazards after taking just a mere 12.5% from the next Stone Edge. This was a pretty hexy game for Keegan, as are many of his games I feel. Most of it went against him in this one, and resulted in a big 5-0 loss to a Dragon Dance Mega Tyranitar sweep. And you know, I think this is just a very good example of what happens when you try to bring stupid fat pink egg things like Chansey. The Hex Gods turn against you, the Gates of Hell open up, and you just get swept by a living mountain, all because Chansey is so terrible. But now we can move on to our number 12 teams. We both actually have the Phoenix Midnights in this spot. Apparently Turbo was playing 2 league games at once during this match, which is impressive, but it's also likely to result in some suboptimal plays being made. Point in case, going for another Draco Meteor on Dan's switch into Mimikyu essentially gave Mimikyu a free Swords Dance. If Turbo hadn't burned the Mimikyu with Volcanion Steam Eruption and then crit it with the next Steam Eruption, he was likely in a position to take a lot of damage from it. With that said, I really liked some of Turbo's prep this game. The Mega Lopunny set was great against Dan's team, and it's unfortunate that it didn't get a chance to do more work against it. Charge Beam Celebi was also very interesting, even though it proved to be rather ineffective, but I do enjoy seeing that level of creativity. Noah.
So for Turbo, repeated use of Substitute might have worked against Dan earlier in the season, when he hadn't learned how to best control his Mons, but with Dan being pretty much in sync with his heavy offensive threats, it may not have been the best idea to put it on multiple members of his team, especially when there are certain Mons on Rose Raiden board where the Substitute Mons can't hit very hard at all, as was the case with Celesteela completely stymied Turbo's Mega Lopunny. I kept him pretty much in the same spot because I didn't necessarily see anything wrong with his performance that would make me feel like he's worse than when I put him in Week 8. Something made sense there. But moving on, both Richard and I have the main red Cloysters at number 11. Because they did not upload their side or provide a replay, I have no notes on them. Richard.
Yep, so this is another one of the games that are MIA as of recording this video. Tone lost 4-0 to the Tennessee Dynamos and was removed from playoff contention as a result, which is pretty unfortunate considering that Tone seemed to be showing a lot of potential early on in the season, topping our Week 0 rankings with his very threatening team, and then it just sort of slipped away from him. But moving on to our number 10 teams, we both have the Bullet Punch Club. And there are 2 teams this week that I was actually really hyped to talk about, and the Bullet Punch Club is one of them. You see, this guy, Uzi, he's like Randy Orton, okay? Randy Orton, the Legend Killer. Hopefully he appreciates that comparison. But in all seriousness, look at what he's done in the back half of the season. Week 6, Uzi beat Fallop, who was on a 3-game undefeated win streak after coming in as a replacement in Week 3. Then, in Week 7, Uzi beat Ethan and the Tennessee Dynamos, who were on a 4-game undefeated win streak after also having joined as a replacement in Week 3. In Week 8, Uzi lost to the Houston Soul Rockets, which is the other team that I really want to talk about this week. And then in Week 9, this week, Uzi beat the Toronto Lux Rays, who were on a 3-game win streak from Week 6 to Week 8 after losing their first match as a replacement coach in Week 5. So to summarize, Uzi broke 3 winning streaks, 2 of which were undefeated streaks, and unfortunately Uzi has no shot at making the playoffs, like I mentioned in the beginning, but there is definitely the chance that he could finish out his last week so strongly that he achieves 5th place in his division, which is a big step up from being in last place going into Week 6, and either way, I give Uzi tremendous credit for not throwing in a towel and for actually trying to redeem his season, which he's definitely done, in my opinion. Noah.
Okay, so first off, when talking about Uzi, I have to say, I'm disappointed I've never gotten the chance to say this yet, but I love your nicknames. I don't know who those people are that you reference. I'm guessing they're wrestling people. I don't know for sure, but I just like it whenever you say their names. It just makes me happy inside whenever I hear them. Just gonna point that out. Now, the key for Uzi in this game was keeping Chandelure alive as long as possible. Turk's best switch-ins to it were an Assault Vest Silvally and Tapu Fini, neither of which has good recovery, so wearing them down with it helped him a lot. Also, not having to worry about Turk setting up rocks gave him an edge that he hasn't been so lucky to get most of this season. This was a very nice win for him. But moving on, number 9, I had the Oklahoma City Thunderous, Richard chose the Toronto Lux Rays, and I have no notes for the Thunderous because they didn't upload, and they didn't provide a replay. Richard.
So for the Toronto Lux Rays, Turk admitted to having overprepped for Dragonite, which ended up not even coming to the game at all. He also mentioned that his Assault Vest Sovali would be responsible for taking on all of Uzi's special threats, which meant that it was eventually overwhelmed by them. He misplayed pretty heavily with his Latias in a few instances, and he also made some misplays around Uzi's Mega Diancie and Terrakion, which really set him up for the loss in those last several turns, but he was able to bring the game down to a close 1-0. But moving on now to our number 8 teams, the top half, we both have the Dewford Drapions. Apparently this match was restarted, I'm guessing several times, but definitely at least once or twice if the Showdown chat is anything to go by. Poor Fallop apparently couldn't hit both a Toxic and an Icicle Crash early in the game, and just decided to settle for hitting the Toxic despite Techno's offer to restart the match another time. Ultimately though, I don't think it would have mattered, as Z-Rain Dance Manaphy was just too overwhelming for Fallop's team to handle. The only thing on Fallop's team that resisted the combination of Surf plus Ice Beam was the Quillfish, which still got taken out by that combination of moves while not being able to do much to the Manaphy in return. Noah.
So Quillfish is a very good low tier mon, especially at the price it's listed at. In this game though, it was the perfect setup fodder for Manaphy, because Manaphy could heal status thanks to its hydration ability, and ultimately Fallop had nothing that could live an attack from it left on his team. In that case, I feel as though he kinda needed a lure to get around it, but he didn't really have one. He had Gourgeist Speed switch into like half of Techno's team, then he let it get Toxic, and that was it first chances in week 9. He didn't seem as prepared as he usually is for these league games. But going on to number 7, I have the Carolina Pantherians. Richard has Rose Radenborg. To me, the Pantherians are the streakiest team in NPL Minors this season. Some weeks they're completely overmatched by their opponents, but in others, like this week, they'll completely subvert my expectations and win without breaking a sweat. As a person who loves Manaphy in League format, that is how you're supposed to use it. He wore down everything on Fallop's side that might be able to take a hit, and went in for the kill shot from there. Richard.
So for the Rosaradenborg, Dan's prep and play this week were both really solid. Celesteela and Azelf put in a lot of work against Turbo's team. He's definitely performing much better now than he did in the first half of the season, which is nice to see because we both know just how good of a player Dan can be, so it's a little off-putting when we see him having as shaky of a start to the season as he did, but he's managed to claw his way back up the rankings, and more importantly, he is in the division where the top 4 teams are confirmed for playoffs, so we can look forward to seeing how he does post-season. But moving on now to our number 6 teams, I have the Oklahoma City Thunderous. Noah, you have the Toronto Lux Rays. Now, Mio has not uploaded an NPL Minors match for the past 3 weeks, so you might be wondering, what's going on? Is Mio dead and playing as a ghost? Is his channel dead? And the answer to those questions is probably not. But never fear, because while Mio may not be uploading his NPL Minors games, he still has some new Weeaboo content to watch if you happen to be into Doki Doki Literature Club, whatever that is. Noah.
Yeah, you should probably go watch that if you're interested in that sort of thing. But talking about the Toronto Lux Rays, setting up Stealth Rocks I think would have helped Turk out a lot, because they would have chipped away at Chandelure and prevented Uzi from being able to obtain the switch advantage so many times. He's still a team I'm high on anyway, so I'm not moving him down much. But going into number 5, I have Rose Radenborg, and Richard has put down the Carolina Pantherians. Well, I would comment on this game, but I want to keep the suspense for when Dan uploads his side tomorrow, so just refer to my comments last week on how high I am on Dan's team. He does continue to use his high-tier offense in ways that don't expose their general frailty, which is a welcome change from earlier on in the season, where he was often playing a turn behind his opponents and taking way too many hits. Richard.
So for the Carolina Pantherians, like I mentioned when I talked about the Dewford Drapion, Z-Rain Dance Manaphy just swept through Fallop's team. It ended up getting 5 kills, and Techno did a really great job at keeping the path clear for Manaphy by not allowing Fallop the possibility of setting up Sticky Web, taking out the Gourgeist, and weakening the biggest potential offensive check to Manaphy in Galvantula. But moving on to our number 4 teams, I have the Tennessee Dynamos. Noah has the Anaheim Altarias. We have these ranks switched. For the Tennessee Dynamos, all we know is that Ethan played the main Red Clawitzers this week. This is another game that we didn't get to see. He won 4-0, his spot in the playoffs is confirmed, and that's about all there is to it. Noah.
Talking about the Anaheim Altarias, it didn't seem like Ace really had to do all that much to pick up the win, as this wasn't a very serious match for his opponent, the LA Fable. We did get to see more of the defensive aspect that the Altarias have available to them, as Tangrowth showed why it's one of the best pivots available in the format. I think I rated him quite a bit lower than I should have last week, so I'm compensating for that by putting him in the top 4. But going on to number 3, the script is flipped. I had the Tennessee Dynamos here, and Richard's put down the Anaheim Altarias. Much like Richard said, there was no game on Ethan's side that we saw, so no notes. Richard.
So, Ace probably has the most obnoxious soundtrack selection for his games ever. The toxic spam strategy, which he very fittingly used this week with his toxic soundtracks, was fairly effective. He knew what sacks to make and when, and it was just a decent game against a team that was clearly meant to be less competitive in nature. But now moving on to our number 2 teams, we both have the Angels of Beheim. Yost played this game well, he got some crucial instances of hacks in his favor, but he also continued to make the most optimal plays following those turns, and he did not relinquish the control that it gave him, which was exactly how he should have played. He got a big Mega Tyranitar sweep, it was cool to see despite the events leading up to it. Noah.
So this game was a fairly standard Dragon Dance Mega Tyranitar sweep, but Yost made some very good choices in prep and in execution beyond that. Frostlass was a great bring, as the Avalugs had very few effective ice resists that Keegan was willing to bring in, and that allowed it to get 2 early kills. He also brought Safeguard on Milotic, so that Chansey couldn't status Vititar as it's set up in front of it. Like, I don't know if he predicted Chansey to come, considering he was riding the bench for 8 games prior to this week, but the fact he accounted for the possibility Keegan might decide to make use of it at the end of the season clinched him the victory, and it was a well-deserved victory on his end. But moving on, both Richard and I thought that the best team in the NPL Minors as of Week 9 is the Houston Soul Rockets. Scarf Diggersby is the greatest invention in the history of Pokemon Draft League, and I will have no one contest me on this point, unless you like the video first. Richard.
So, like I said, this is one of the 2 teams that I really wanted to talk about this week. Noah, you already touched on these sentiments in your video last week, but I just really want to emphasize the success story that is the Houston Soul Rockets run in this season of the NPL Minors. Adam took a team that both of us had given very low ratings in the preseason, scoring just above the Portland Trailblazers meme team, and actually made something successful out of it. He really struggled in the first several weeks to gain a foothold, coming off of a rough start and then having an up and down series of weeks to close out the first half of the season, but then, going into the latter portion of the season, we see Adam really starting to... What the fuck is that noise? Did you hear that?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear the buzzing.
Let me redo that part. He really struggled in the first several weeks to gain a foothold, coming off of a rough start and then having an up and down series of weeks to close out the first half of the season. But then, going into the latter portion of the season, we see Adam really starting to hit his stride, rising steadily through the ranks, and now he's at the top of his division and pretty much guaranteed for playoffs. To put this into more perspective, Adam's record in the first 5 weeks was 2-3. As of Week 9, Adam's record in the second half of the season is 4-0, which is a huge improvement. And I think I can speak for all analysts when I say that we never really want to count a team out completely, so when we point out the flaws and we give heavy criticisms, the hope is that those teams will rise to the occasion and improve, which Adam exemplified perfectly, and it's just really cool to see. As for his game this week, Ironhead on Mew was a great point of prep to handle the Mega Gardevoir. Aside from that, Nihilego netted a few kills and applied a ton of offensive pressure, and even Suicune looked surprisingly powerful this week. But I think that is going to conclude this portion of our power rankings. Closing out the video, I do just want to give a few more notes on the playoff picture going into Week 10. We've already discussed the 4 teams from the Dusk Conference who have been mathematically eliminated, and touched on a few of the teams who are confirmed for playoffs, but just to summarize it here, the 4 teams in the Dusk Conference who are absolutely confirmed for playoffs no matter what are the Angels of Beheim, currently leading the division and the league at 7-2 with a plus 19 differential. They are followed by the Tennessee Dynamos at 6-3 plus 15 differential, and the Rosa Radenborg also 6-3 but with a plus 8 differential, and currently in 4th place in the division as of Week 9, the Oklahoma City Thunderous at 5-4 and plus 7 differential. They are all also confirmed for the playoffs. The Dream Conference is a bit more tricky with only 2 teams eliminated from playoffs. I want to say that realistically the first 3 teams are confirmed for playoffs. These teams are the Houston Soul Rockets, the Anaheim Altarias, and the Carolina Pantherians, all at 6-3 with plus 12, plus 7, and plus 3 differentials respectively. I think that there is technically a mathematical chance that none of their positions are fully secure, but the only 2 teams that could potentially catch up to their records, if they all lose Week 10, are the Toronto Luxrays and the Dewford Drapions, both at 5-4, but these 2 teams are actually playing each other in Week 10, only one can win, meaning that the top 3 teams are essentially confirmed. Noah, do you have any closing notes to say about the state of the NPL Minors as of this point?
The only thing I will say is that I want to thank you so much for coming along with me for these power rankings for the past however many times you've done it. I want to say 5 or 6. I definitely missed having you last week. I definitely do appreciate all the work you do, not only typing your notes and doing whatever, but also editing these videos and getting them up on time for viewers to see. Because when I had to do it all by myself last week, I was really, really tired by the end of it. So I just want to say it's been a blast to be with you doing these power rankings for Season 4.
Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Believe me, it's been a joyride having such an easy co-host to go along with and doing these rankings with. I think we kind of mesh well together in our thoughts, and and even despite that, we provide slightly different perspectives in the ranks, which kind of just gives it a bit more flavor. So I really just appreciate how awesome you are to work with. And again, thank you very much for covering for that last week of the power rankings. My bad, but
never again. Never again.
Hopefully not, but we want to just say thank you guys so much for watching. We do have one more week, and we will probably give a bit more accurate of a playoff picture during that week, as well as, the typical ranking, so be on the lookout for that. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good night.